with all due respect.
All right, recording in progress with all due respect 19. I know the last 3 episodes, I forgot what number this was. And Gray's, I was like, with all due respect, I'm like, Gray's like 16, like 16. That's it, right? So we have Dr. Austin Pack, and this is a conversation me and Gray think is going to be a huge conversation around, I guess, training health, injury prevention, training the tactical athlete, right?
Right.
And before we had this conversation, I kind of had like, well, what is the tactical athlete, right? I understand that there's certifications for a tactical athlete. First, Austin, kind of introduce yourself, who you are, what you do. You're in Greenville, what your background is, and just add a little bit of credibility of like, hey, I've been there, done that when I work with, first responders and military and the tactical athlete, and just kind of give us an introduction to who you are, and we can kind of go from there.
100%, man. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
So, yeah, Dr. Austin Pack, licensed physical therapist and certified strength conditioning coach with NSCA. Almost also a former Marine Corps veteran, infantry side. So we got out 2015, did 2 tours and a bunch of training in schools and to get all these different certifications and stuff. So we talk about a tactical athlete. I definitely was there, front lines and, really just utilizing all of the things that we have to utilize as a tactical athlete. And this can also be related to first responders being police force, fire department, anything of that nature, and military as well. So yeah, I grew up in Spartanburg, South Carolina, born and raised out there, and I grew up very active, just in different things, different sports. Didn't really stick to one thing, being very active. So, long story short, got done and everything, went to school, and then I realized, after even serving in high school in JROTC, having that military experience and exposure, I realized that I had this like calling to serve. I've always been a very like serving type guy, like selfless in nature. So, but I also wanted to join a unit that was very like headstrong and forward. So I was like, well, let me join the Marine Corps, right? So, and let me go infantry, right? But I really wanted that challenge. I want to accept that and be able to give back and just learn. So I did that 4 years. I did really great. I loved it. I got out mainly for my daughter and just to try to see how the school route would take me. I felt like I had different aspirations still left to explore because had I stayed in, I feel like I just would have kept with it and, wouldn't be where I am now, which is a physical therapist and very blessed to have taken that path and be able to carry all my experience with me. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What led you to want to pursue physical therapy after being in the Marine Corps? Like, what was that switch where you're like, this is a career path I
Yeah.
can see myself taking?
Yeah, it was kind of like a slow blossoming thing. So like I actually, utilized the GI Bill. I went to undergrad at Spartanburg at USC Upstate. And then I started kind of switching my degree. I was in management field. So I always knew I wanted to do something in business, right? I wanted to be like business oriented and be, even in the Marine Corps, I was a team and squad leader. So I had guys under me. I had to navigate and all this stuff and people report to what we were doing and everything. So um, basically kind of getting my way through that. And then I discovered exercise science, the science of exercise and movement, everything like that, the strength conditioning aspect. So I also did a little personal training in that time as well. One thing led to another. Biggest thing was that I had a family incident happen and I saw how injury just kind of took somebody out. It was unfortunate and, they had a long recovery. And at that time, people were talking to me about physical therapy. And I was like, well, I had a little bit of experience with it because right before that, I actually herniated 2 discs in my back. We were just talking about that recently. So I'm living proof that, you can recover from that without surgery. And then I just saw the power and healing and knowledge, really just understanding how to help someone and help them understand, so you don't have to constantly have that person have to rely on you. They more so just kind of like become independent and stronger and more confident. So that whole aspect of it just drew me in. And then once I did some hours checking out what PTs do and everything like that, it was a wrap. And I was
That's
like,
awesome.
yeah, yeah.
It's amazing the number of people that get geared towards physical therapy based off their own injury.
Yeah.
I know so many people that went the physical therapy route and they say, oh, I was a 15-year-old girl and I tore my ACL
Mhm.
and I went to physical therapy and came back and got stronger and I
Yeah.
still played my sport and I was just so inspired by the people that motivated me. I went to physical therapy school,
Yeah.
right? I hear that so often, and I think that's a I think that's a very valuable aspect of a physical therapist that's gone through that,
Mhm.
because you have a certain level of empathy
Mhm.
for somebody that goes through a major injury. And I think empathy is a big thing in physical therapy, being able to connect with that person one on one and be like, hey, I've been there. I know what it's like to have a herniated disc. I know what it's like to tear my ACL, right? It
Yeah.
creates a really good bedside manner.
It does.
100%. And like the
Yeah.
activity behind it too. I've said this on one of our first podcasts, just having a physical therapist or anybody on your team that's already active is so important because you're already going to align with that journey. You know, it's so much harder for you to resonate and align with somebody that's not active or doesn't train the way you train. So having a physical therapist that knows the value of being active is really important.
Yes. Yes.
What got you inspired? Like I came up with this kind of going through your Instagram, and you did a lot of presentations for firefighters, combat athletes, the first responders. What inspires you? And even before we videoed this or we hit live and went live,
Mhm.
even when we talked a little bit about first responders and training for them, injury prevention, keeping them active in their job, right?
Right.
Because it's much like a professional athlete. You're actually training people for their job, right?
Yeah.
One,
Yeah.
to protect themselves, but then protect the people around them, right?
Mhm.
As soon as I kind of brought it up, it seemed like you kind of sat up in your chair a little bit more. Like you kind of were like, oh, like there was an inspiration there for first responders. When did you realize this was a niche you really enjoyed, you wanted to move forward? And
Mhm.
then kind of describe some of the things you've done in the community with first responders and where you see the need.
Yeah, that's a great question. So this was also a very slow blossoming thing, but it started really actually in physical therapy school. I didn't really understand like what I was going to do with it. But I knew in that moment, going through those 3 years of school, that like being in the Marine Corps kind of set me apart as far as like the rigors of the jobs I've had to perform and just the attitude I've had to have, the principles, the foundations, the values, and then taking that and understanding how we are trained as physical therapists to treat people, and then seeing kind of almost a disconnect in a lot of places, you know, whether it's like a fire department or a police department or anything like that, or even a unit to some degree in a military, but there's sometimes like a lack of having that person there, that knowledge to really understand how to be, you know, cohesive with how they're doing fitness and taking care of their body outside of their job so that they can perform at their best, which we always said in the Marine Corps, like you're only as strong as your weakest person in the team. So when I say when I go to when I, you know, recently taught at the fire department in Kentucky, you know, a lot of those guys there, you know, they were dealing with their own injury, and girls dealing with their own injuries and things in the past that kept coming around and coming around. And I'm just looking at this as a whole, and I'm like, you have a very rigorous job, and like you have to constantly just be on call. Even at 3 a.m., you got to wake up, you got to get out real quick, be able to maneuver without even stretching or anything like that. And you're already injured doing that. So
Mhm.
to me, it's like they're not really able to serve their full capacity if it's needed. Say if that call is like really serious and they have to, you know, they put out this fire in the building and have to climb up the ladder, you know, get bodies out of there, and they have, you know, provide, you know, medical services and the full nine, and they have to navigate all of that through even like, you know, Woodline or something like that. You know, they have those people to do that, but like if that person's already struggling, like that's only going to set that person back a little bit. So if they're constantly dealing with that and it's not being resolved there, then there's something going on where they're not really understanding how to resolve that, right? So
Mm.
that's what I see when I ask these questions to people, and I'm like, hey, like, what have you been doing for that? What have you been doing for that need? You know, and they tell me, and then they're just kind of like, yeah, you know, like I deal with
Right. So
it.
you travel around to different states to
Yeah, so
visit
I've
with
done this.
different.
So that's actually the company that I've contracted with. I do the injury prevention side for them.
Okay.
I recently did that one, and I'm actually doing. I mentioned I'm doing the one this Saturday at Phnm Fire Department, but that's through my
Sweet.
company. Yeah,
Okay.
connected
Awesome.
with them, and I'll go out there and provide the one shift we're going to work with a full like it'll be like 2 hours of just education, anatomy review, and what is injury, walk through some stuff, take them through some movements, and then I'll do some injury screens, and then we'll
Wow,
just
that
kind
is just
Yeah,
for
explain
any
what that looks
athlete,
like.
that's so cool.
Explain what that looks like from an injury screening.
yeah,
Or kind of explain that 2 hours, what you do,
uh huh.
what impact it can have, what kind of feedback you've had.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is this usually not something they're provided? like I'm green on, you know what I'm saying? Like, is this abnormal for a fire department to have access for this?
I feel like, yeah, from what I've heard and from what I've talked to, like the smaller departments, especially, they have not received anything of this nature, and they are like
That's crazy.
wondering. I'm talking to the chief, and I'm saying, hey man, like, what do you guys know about this? What have you done? Like he's like, well, we don't really do anything. We have our gym here. I try to get everybody in and work out, and we go through things. But as far as like understanding injury and why their back keeps hurting and why their ankle keeps not moving the right way, like they don't know. So like what they don't know, they can't really address. So when I see that, and I feel like I hear, them telling me, hey, this apartment really doesn't have anything either, and this one doesn't, and this one does, but like, I guess it depends on, like, it always comes back to the funds, the resources, and what they even realize will benefit them as far as that goes, as injury risk reduction goes.
That's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
When you go into these departments, are you basically performing screening on every single one, or are you showing them what a screening looks like? Or because I could see that being pretty tedious, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're screening everybody,
Mhm.
or are you basically just doing some sort of movement screen to catch really gross irregularities and movement patterns, or really the gross movement things, right? The major patterns. What's the screening look like for that?
Yeah. So what you just said a little bit, actually, the gross pattern movement. So I actually do use a thing called selective functional movement assessment that allows me to basically break down top tier patterns that any human should be able to do without any pain or any deficits in their mobility, as far as like what we're expected to see going off of all the evaluated numbers that have been studied. Hey, you should have 90 degrees of cervical rotation to both sides, right? Those are just facts. If you have, obviously if someone's metal rods in their neck and they've had surgery, that's a little different. But a standing healthy person with no, nothing like that impeding their joints should be able to have certain ranges of motion. So I'm looking at that. And I'm also using a functional movement screen that allows me to take people through 7 movements. And half of those can be done without equipment. So with that part, I do have to break out a couple of people and take them through that. And obviously, if it's a small department like this one, will be a little bit smaller, so like maybe a dozen or so. For that shift, actually, I'll be able to actually navigate that better. And then my goal is to build that, and then when I have people on my team, to be able to disperse the load a little bit when it does get there, because that is the goal, to be able to do that as well. So then I can just break out a whole different whole different beast right there. So
Yeah, sure. How does that drive how does that drive change for you? Like when you take somebody through the functional movement screening, and you obviously provide that feedback back to them, right? With their feedback and their scores, right? Um, all screening is only as good as the change that it drives, right? Like you could get that score and you could see those things and you could be like, right?
yeah.
But evaluations have to drive habit change and have to drive it has to drive you to make a change in your fitness, your movement, your workouts, right? What is the action step for that department after you do this evaluation, right? Because they really base a decision after that. They're like, well, I did my movement screening, I
Yeah.
did all my things. Now what do I do? Right?
Right.
Do you work with them as far as trying to implement some sort of exercise routine, health, wellness routine? What's the next step?
Yeah. So for me, what ideally what I'd like to see, moving forward when I start to do a lot more of these, is that when, after everything's said and done, before we even do anything, I'm like, hey, what do you want out of this? What are your goals? What is injury risk reduction to you? How do you get injured? Have them tell me this stuff, so that way I know where to go with this, because then when they validate what they need, I don't have to do it for them. I just show them what we're going to go through. I provide them, yeah, your score is this, but here's why. So when I say here's why, and then we do a movement breakout, and I take them through very general but intentional and kind of complex movements at the end of the day. And I show them with and without equipment. And I show them, hey, they'll notice the differences that they feel. It kind of makes more impact in that moment, as opposed to just saying some verbiage and that's it. Because then what I'd like to see is that we can put together a game plan, whether it be me come in, quarterly, or me check in, sometimes even monthly if it was a shorter duration, where I can come in and actually lead something for them, just like a person would say if a unit already has someone who is a strength conditioning specialist, they would be in there, or they'd come in there on contract base and actually come in and provide that programming for that department or whatever it may be. So it'd be the same sense in my regard, but more from that injury risk reduction, not so much treatment unless they actually wanted to seek out and get treatment from me, because there always is. So there's always cases where it's like, you'd be more appropriate to actually be treated for this, right? Not just do your movements that I've showed you,
What's different in their program? Like, do you have them do exercises that you wouldn't have certain Gen Pop do? Or is it like a different kind of regimen?
I typically, the movements I do, I will typically use for anybody. The thing is, I don't really work a lot with the general population. I work with specifically like people who are competing in some degree.
Right.
Only because, there's something they need a little bit more, and I can provide that, 'cause I have had the experience of working with those elite athletes. In my last internship I did with Exos, actually, is a company. I got to work with SF, I got to work with NFL, and I got to see people at their highest level still dealing with these pain points that I've seen people that maybe don't perform as high as they do, but they still have the same. And there's always a connection I see, and I see these trends. So I start to see the trends, and it starts to give me this feedback, and then I start to be able to like provide them better service and then break things down simpler, as opposed to just taking them through the wheelhouse of everything.
Right.
Did you work in the physical therapy aspect with Exos?
Yeah. I was there. At the Florida location.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a physical therapist there.
Yeah, I was intern.
Okay, an internship. Okay.
Yeah. So the mentor I had down there at the time, and the people I learned from were phenomenal, and hats off to them if they listen to this.
Yeah, sure.
Because they and the people along in my schooling and everything, and former job even, they've all like, I've taken nuggets from everywhere and just been able to like apply what I'm doing now. And when I get people telling me, they feel this way, or they feel this way, or they can feel this better, and it's only a matter of time, and it's as long as they trust the process, like, and they understand what I'm doing and what they're doing, understanding goals and communication. I mean, obviously education. Sure. I think those are the biggest things.
Sure. We talked a little bit about this before. Being former military, does that pull a lot of current military or former military to you? Like, are a lot of people who are former military or current military, because of your background, does that give you a little bit of I'd say street cred is the word I'm looking for.
Street cred for
street
sure.
Cred.
That's
street
exactly
cred
what I was thinking.
When former military are coming to you, or they're current military, or maybe they're not current military, does that help a lot with that clientele to know that, all right, this guy's being former military, he understands a lot more about what I've gone through?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just having that, people seeing that, I definitely wear that because it's something I am proud of, and it's something I enjoy. I think it's more so something I really enjoyed that makes me just enjoy it that much more, and be able to relate that to those combat tactical sports that I'm trying to.
I mean, it fuels your passion, right? Like, you get to work with people that you have a personal experience with, essentially, because you went through that. And I think that makes you love your job more because you can relate. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know any of my friends and there's a couple I think about right now, that had rigorous jobs in the military that are 100% healthy. I don't think any of them come out and they're like, neck, back, shoulder.
Right? Hey, I will say, I came out like that. I did come out like that. They told us to go get examined full body. I did. Yeah. And I can say, I just turned 34 and like, I feel great. And I've done this all on my own because I understand what I need to do. And like, everybody can technically do that coming from that place. They just have to, one, want to do it.
Yeah. I mentioned the guy. I mentioned the guy.
That's right.
I mentioned the guy we went before. He was went to jump school. He's got over 100 jumps, and he's like, he goes, I don't know anybody that's had over 100 jumps that hit the floor 100 times, and none of those guys feel great anymore.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
They're in their 30s, and they're like, no, he's like, I got 100. He goes, I got 134 jumps, and no, I didn't have 134 clean ones either. He's like, so
that's a lot of impact. That's a lot of impact.
Yeah, those guys don't feel awesome all the time, right? Obviously you moved from the tactical athlete, general population. Share with us the similarities in working with athletes and the requirement to working with the tactical athlete, right?
Yeah.
What are some commonalities in that? whether
Yeah.
you have somebody coming to you and they're like, CrossFit competitor, like you mentioned, Spartan Games, even to like, I think we have a rising population of people who want to remain competitive in some sort of sport or athletics as long as they can. They don't want to lose that, right? They play a sport, they grew up playing sports. They want to remain healthy.
I mean, us included, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, that's
We-
everybody, right? But I think that population is growing, right? I think that population is growing. I think we
Yeah.
have a population in this country of people that are like, I'm trying to slow down aging, and I hurt when I stop.
Yeah.
I hurt
And
when I stop,
you
and
know,
I
by
usually
nature,
stop. I usually stop when I get hurt.
yeah. By nature, I feel
Right?
like we're very competitive. We're a competitive species. So like if you
Yeah.
can continue competitiveness in some way, I think it's a very mentally healthy thing.
Yes.
But yeah.
What is the commonalities between that athletic side and that combat athlete, or that tactical athlete that's a first responder or military? Do you understand what I'm asking? Like,
Yeah.
there's got to be a bridge there that have some commonalities. What would you say some of those are?
I could think of three right now.
Okay.
So, and one of them, well, technically two of them will apply to really anybody. But rotation is a big
Mm.
component in any athletic sport. Rotation is a very pivotal movement that the body needs to be able to do and do it well without compensation, without pain points or anything like that. So when I say rotation, solely from the spine, right? The spine. So I'm definitely like, when I target things, when I look at stuff, and even if it's like something at the shoulder, I'll look at the spine. I look and see how the pelvis is moving as well. Obviously, if it's like a lower body injury. But I'll say the common thing I see between the two is that typically there's a lot of decreased rotation in the spine, and even in like the shoulders themselves and hips. Another thing would be just overall like understanding of how to engage and use the core muscles and like what
Mhm.
purpose is and like why people talk so much about that, and some of the myths behind that, I believe too. And then yeah, so those are like two of the big ones right there, and just kind of relating that to like the rigors that they have to kind of perform in would also be leading to the third one, which would be like they have to be able to be adaptable in any situation.
Uh,
So like if they land on one leg and they have 30 pounds on one side of the body for some reason. I'm just thinking of somebody who might be getting tackled with a football player and they have to navigate on one leg and be able to rotate their body and absorb that. Like that's not the same as like someone sitting down on a leg machine or a leg extension machine and just controlling that angle. They have to
Mm.
control 25 different angles at that given time in a split second. And if they can't manage that and they're not aware of that position, the system's going to fail. So
yeah, I definitely buy the rotation side of it, right? Because I tell people, I think my fastest route to the hospital would be if somebody had me swing a baseball bat correctly right now, right? Like,
yeah,
like if my hips are moving, my shoulders are moving too, bro. Like
Yeah.
they're on my hips and shoulders work on the same plane at this age, bro.
We
You know what I'm saying?
we
Right?
went
Like,
to
yeah,
the Greenville Drive as the baseball team here, Josh, like the Fireflies, and
yeah.
we my fiance and I went to their they had a hit around or whatever, and his company got to go, and he used to play baseball, and he got out there and he swung. And he was like, that's the first time I've hit a baseball in like 10 years. He was so sore the next
Yeah,
day from the
yeah,
rotation of the baseball
yeah,
swing. It's just amazing.
wow.
yeah. Or a golf swing, or a
Golf
golf swing,
swing, 100, anything like
or a
that.
baseball
Anything like
swing.
that.
Um,
Yeah.
That's
what
just
was
huge.
it like? What was it like going from Exos to? Did you go straight from Exos to your business now?
No, so I did that, and then once I got done with school, I ended up going to work in a clinic. I worked
Okay.
in a little bit for like half a year, and then I already knew I was going to start this business. I just didn't know when
Yeah.
I was going to.
Sure. Yeah.
Matter of doing it before it's too late, right? So I was like,
Yeah.
hey, do it now, right? So I did it, and yeah, that's pretty much
When
it.
you was one of the driving motive. So when you went to the clinic environment, um, I feel like so many people that enter physical therapy school, they have a lot of them are former athletes, right?
Mhm.
They think like, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to go work at a clinic, and I'm going to work with athletes.
Yeah,
And then what happens is they go to the clinic, and 70% of it is, you know,
70 plus.
yeah, somebody, and I'm trying to say this in the nicest way, is
yeah,
that
it's common
you end up
sense.
working with my mom who has rotator cuff
Yeah,
pain
Yeah.
because she heard it pulling weeds out of the ground. in the
Yeah.
backyard, right?
Mhm.
Or, you know, risk of people falling or people who get injured that way. Was that a motivator for you to be like, hey, my passion is the athlete side. I want to do it my own way. I want to do my own thing.
So it's
Was it?
actually it was actually reversed. It was like I knew that's what my passion. I knew that's where it lied.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I knew that, coming out, I was just getting in and I was just trying to see, hey, can I make that possible for myself in that environment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Environment doesn't allow you. I mean, granted, they'll tell you things like, hey, if you just kind of like list this thing here in the system, it'll kind of hopefully funnel more people your way that are more on the
Mhm.
athletic side.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, I mean, maybe it does a little bit, but at the end of the day, we're still in that environment, working under insurance and
Mhm.
working for a population that needs that type of care with that type of environment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, it was more like I knew going in, I was going to have to kind of like mentally prepare myself. And I already had familiarity with this place. But I was like, okay, let me just, it's all about your perspective. Like, so I went in because I'm very like, I look at things from a different way and I try to always have a different attitude about stuff. So I went in and I pretty much did it and I was great at it, right? But the load and the time that you had to spend with people, it was just so little. And then I was like,
Mhm.
it's not for me because here's what I want to do and here's what is trying to keep me.
You're able.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And again, like we talked about previously, I think with you already knowing what your passion is,
Mhm.
you being able to actually dip into a side that not a lot of people touch is
Right.
really cool. Like I have never heard of somebody that dips more into law enforcement and first responders. I've really never heard of that. I'm sure there's other people like that, but I think that's a really cool niche.
Yeah.
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 I can see the challenges of doing an internship at Exos, then going into general population,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Because
tough.
at
It's tough.
Exos, you're getting the best of the best, right?
Yeah.
You're getting
Yeah.
high level performers, right?
Yeah.
Also, high level performers are usually very highly motivated, right?
It is.
So
Yeah.
motivation's not a goal, not hard, right?
Right.
Motivation's not hard because they're usually where they're at because they're highly motivated, right?
Mhm.
Then you like take from that environment, go into other environments. You're like, well, why are they not motivated? Do they want to get
Yeah.
healthy? Do they want to get
Yeah.
better?
Yeah.
Do they want to? Having worked in the private environment with athletes before,
Yeah.
inspiration's never a problem.
Right.
Mhm.
Like
It's
the
not.
athletes that come to you,
Yeah.
um, and even the first responders that come to you, that seek you out, or the military people that seek you out, they're usually not the ones that need your most help.
Mhm.
You're probably seeing a lot of those guys and you're being like, well, you need to slow down. Like,
Yeah.
we need to manage your
Exactly.
recovery,
I was
right?
gonna say, it's more about appreciation and awareness and patience. Those are the three toughest things for them
Yeah.
to be
I
able
feel
to,
that.
navigating
Yeah.
injury because it's one of those things that's frustrating for anybody. But to be at a very high level and know that you have the setback is like very. So that kind of brings me into like the thing I like to include as far as like looking at a client attribute, the athlete attribute profile, and looking at like different concepts as far as like lifestyle and
Mhm.
mindset and all this stuff, and kind of really gauging that and just having a conversation about it. Like, hey, let's acknowledge this real quick. Let's see where you are, because if that's all off and it's like up and down and crazy, like your injury is really not gonna get any better. It may
And
get a little better. It's not gonna take you too far.
what do you mean?
So like, cause like really just having a conversation about like, their mindset, like their stressors and everything, because
uh,
everything outside of physical attributes also plays a part in their healing of the tissues, because, different hormone levels and different like mindset, like their mindset around things and the stress can negatively affect the impact of their healing. So if we're looking at that and they're just like, man, I'm like really stressed out right now, just got injured and I got this going on, and they want me to be here and I have to
mm,
like have this, test. I have to do this like performance tests in 3 weeks. They're all over the place. That's just going to destroy their ability to heal like in a positive manner.
mhm.
And it'll probably do a little bit more of this fluctuation first, which also frustrates them even more. So it's really about like having that trust and like being able to just be open and communicative at that moment, because I have seen that happen where it's like
Yeah.
just spinning in circles in
I
that
think one
moment.
of the hardest things to deal with any high performing
Yeah.
population is managing their expectation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What does real and painting out to them, what does real recovery look like? What does real injury prevention look like? What does, if you come in and this can be you know, first responders. This could be the 13-year-old girl. This could be anybody. Sitting down with them and having a real explanation to them of what this process looks like.
Yeah.
What are the steps to recovery?
Right.
Because believe it or not, I've had 17-year-old lacrosse kids get ACL surgery in January and be like, yeah, I'll be good for summer in June. I'll be good for summer lacrosse in June. And I'm
Yeah.
like, wait, why do I have to be the one having this conversation with him? Somebody should have had this conversation. His doctor should have had
Yeah.
this conversation with him when he gets an ACL repair in January and he thinks June 1st he's going to start travel lacrosse.
Mhm.
Because he's not.
Yeah.
We know he's not, right?
Right.
We know he's not. And I think we miss that sometimes with the young kids.
Yeah.
Of, well, what does it look like if the 15-year-old girl, you know, tears her ACL? I mean, it's a hard, you know, as we get older, the years become shorter, right?
Mhm.
Right. When we're 15 years old, a year feels like 15 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They feel like they're just lost their whole life, right?
Yeah.
And to explain to a 15-year-old girl who tears her ACL in April of her season and telling her there's a good chance you might not be 100% until January, February, March, depending on what goes
Mhm.
with it. That's a tough conversation, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It is.
that's a tough conversation with a girl, or even firefighters, right? When they
Yeah.
get injured, because there's some loyalty to their shift.
Mhm.
There is hardcore loyalty to their shift. I know that from hearing guys like they're like brothers. They
Yeah.
are. Hearing my friends talk, they're like family, right? And if something happens and they're out for 2 days and um they go on a call and somebody gets hurt and they weren't able to be there, they wear that, bro.
Yeah.
I've heard them wear that
Yeah.
like painfully, right? So you bring that up, being able to have that conversation with people
Yeah.
about what the process looks like. I feel like
That's
orthopedics lose that sometimes. I feel like
yeah.
orthopedics.
Yeah, and I feel like, maybe some of them, and I don't know if it has something to do with what they feel like their jobs technically is, and I'm not
Yeah,
going to speak on behalf, but
yeah.
just from what I've seen, they are very overloaded as far as who the people they see. So
Mhm.
I've spoken to, physicians and orthopedists and all this, like, and I've talked to them about like, hey, like, what does that look like for you? And you can hear it, you can tell like a lot of them, if they're in that environment, they're just kind of getting that, they're just getting that constant,
Yeah,
just here's another person, here's another person, here's another person, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
for me, what like obviously people come to me because they want this value that's way up here, and that's what I provide. But when I bring out the whiteboard and we talk, and I'm drawing stuff out, and I'm like
Mhm.
just I'm chopping up with them, right? I'm keeping it very just like relaxed but I'm also providing facts. So if someone comes to me and they're like, man, I've been spinning my wheels forever with this injury. I've been seeing a
Okay,
chiropractor. I saw this person.
okay.
I got this injection, and I'm like, cool. Let's break down the tissues real quick. And I'm going to ask them like, hey, what do you want to, I start asking about their goals, get that insight first. Yeah, they want to be out of pain, but like what after that? Like once I get you out of pain, what do you want after that? Right.
Mm,
So when I start having their wheels turning, it starts to boost their positivity and understanding,
Mhm.
which then allows them to feel more empowered along that healing
mm.
process, as long as it's not like some type of structural damage that legitimately is like irreparable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's a whole nother hard conversation, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that's a whole nother conversation. I've
Yep.
had athletes that have had head injuries, right? And they're
Mhm.
16 years old and they got 5 concussions.
Right.
Me.
And you're like, well, somebody's going to have the conversation of the risks here,
Yeah.
right? Of being 16, 17 years old, what your future looks like. What's the next one look like?
Yeah.
And no, I like that. I like the idea of sitting down and I guess being able to be in your own clinic, more intimate, more work one-on-one with any population. It allows you the ability to sit down with somebody. Um, and I don't care who it is, right? It could be that CrossFit competitor, right?
Mhm.
Um, I I live very much in the jujitsu community, right? Um, you 50% of those guys would have to lose a limb to stop.
Yeah.
I've seen dudes roll up in
And
there
they probably
with
still wouldn't stop.
no, I've seen dudes rolled up in there with fingers taped together with gloves on, like because
Yeah.
the fingers dislocated or toes dislocated, or I can't tell you how many kids. I got a buddy of mine right now that's 6 months post ACL injury. It's torn. He's still going. He's like,
Yeah.
I'll fix it later. I'm like, well, your quad's about half the size of the other one right now. Might want to address this problem now,
Yeah.
right? Right. But no, being able to sit down with people and be like, here's what recovery looks like.
Yeah. And
Right.
not only are you helping like their physical health, you're absolutely helping their mental health, because that's a huge part
Oh, dude.
of what they do, and to be able to have like mental clarity or just like positive conversation around your healing process, I think is huge. Cause like you said earlier, it really could make or break, the whole entire healing process. And for anybody listening too, I think what really helps you stand apart is being able to have a lot of time with your patients or clients. And I think that, not to knock a typical setting inside of a clinic, but only having like 20, 30 minutes sometimes, or 15 minutes it's just not always enough time to fully understand what you're going through.
Right.
Do you work primarily one-on-one?
Yeah. So typically
Okay.
my long session would be like 75 minutes for an evaluation.
That's awesome.
I do everything else an hour. And if I'm doing recovery sessions, if it's appropriate for the individual, if I feel it's appropriate for the individual, it'll be 30 minutes, up to 30 minutes for any type of recovery work that I do. And then obviously I mentioned a lot about the hybrid aspect of it too, of me being like in touch remotely and being able to flex. And the app that I use has videos that I, put on there if they're working with me through a plan of care, and they can actually access those videos that I prescribe to.
Yeah.
That's
nice.
awesome.
After I've demonstrated it, because I'm huge on demonstration, knowing what I'm doing and how to actually like do the movement, show them like, yeah, this is why you're doing this, because of this measurement we just took. And that measurement is the reason why you're probably feeling this here, because I just did this other test that then told me that, you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah,
another, and I'm just reconfirming everything that I find in my evaluation. So that's probably the most impactful thing, is when I do an evaluation for somebody.
Definitely.
Yeah,
The
for sure.
information that you gain through that, and just like the why of moving in a certain way or loading a certain thing, I think is important, because they'll remember that forever, right? Like they'll know if it's a repeat injury, they'll know, okay, this happened while I was lifting, and I remember from my eval or from my treatment. Exactly. So then they're able to probably recover a lot faster.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've had kids say they injure a knee, and they'll be like, oh, pains at like a 5. And then they'll go to an orthopedic and they'll get an MRI, and they realize there's nothing wrong with the knee. Nothing. Well, it's a sprain. The next day their pain's like a 2, and then 3 days later they're playing. Right. The affirmation, even just the affirmation from an MRI that nothing's bad. The brain, right?
It's so mental.
Yeah, and that's why I harp on that so much.
Yeah, and some of it is like the injury, some of it is 16-year-old kids, right?
Yeah.
But like, I bet when you sit down with people and go over that process with them and be like, hey, this isn't a career ender. You are going to be able to do CrossFit. You are going to be able to do, these other competitions you're doing. You are going to be able to go back to work with the fire department. You are going to be able to go back on the streets with the police department. Once you explain that to them and say, hey, this is the process that it looks like, and here are your benchmarks, right? I think we're missing that. I also see a big trend with the one-on-one physical therapy trend. I think people are starting, and again, I'm not trying to knock a hospital. So many people that work in the hospital system are handcuffed by the demands of the hospital system, right? So I think there are great, wonderful people that work in the hospital system that aren't allowed to be wonderful. They aren't allowed to be great. They aren't allowed to be passionate about what they do. It's bill people by the unit, get 4 people in at a time, get the next one. 4 people in a unit, get people out the next time.
Yeah.
But I see a population of physical therapists moving away from that, getting into the one-on-one, getting into the real care. And I think eventually our hospital system is going to have to catch up to the quality of the care provided, not backwards, not them have to catch up, right, to them. So
See that.
I'm seeing that grow more and more. I'm also seeing it more and more getting involved in that long-term athlete side, right? It's not just, what's the test they do? There's a specific test around the falling test, if they're likely to fall down and get hurt. It's an old functional test they did with the elderly if they're at risk of falling.
Erg balance.
Yeah, what is it?
Erg balance.
Some sort of, that might be it. It's like standing on one foot, sitting down, standing up, all these balance
Yes.
test they do if you're likely. Man, I tell you what, people are moving past that. Now people want to be functional movement screened.
Right. Yeah.
Now people want to do right. I mean, 60-year-old people are like, screw just being able to survive.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
You're showing me just how to survive. I want to thrive
Exactly.
beyond being survival,
Yeah.
right? I want
Yeah.
to, I don't want to just survive. Like nobody, you know, the average person lives 77 years. Like nobody wants to just like be miserable, like be
Mhm.
functional till they're 50 and spend the last 27 years of their life being immobile and not moving.
Right.
That population is dying. People want to redline it, be functional, compete, be active. And if you die, man, I tell you, and I hope this doesn't sound morbid, I would rather die early, functional, moving, enjoying life, and know that I lived it to the fullest
Hmm.
than sit in a chair and have pain all the time until I'm 77 years old.
It's
and can't do-
torture. That's long-term torture. Yeah.
I don't know.
Quality of life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for
and that
sure.
sounds like what you're doing, right? You're adding quality of the life,
Yeah.
not just for the first responders, for the general population, for the people.
And you're keeping athletes competitive and working, which is the best part too, you know,
Exactly.
managing their injury.
Exactly. Like even the people that come to me, they are injured, but like, hey, I still have to do this.
Yeah, I still got to
Yeah.
go to work on Monday, bro.
Yeah.
Still
Yeah.
have people
Yeah.
right now doing that, but it's
Yeah.
it's cool because the communication aspect for me is so heavy that like they don't really ever ask me questions because I'm already ahead of them. I
Yeah.
already know what I need to ask them and see
Yeah.
how they feel, and I know I need to recommend or tweak on the app or the next time I see them or something like that. So I mean that is so huge, and that keeps
Yeah.
their even higher as far as the health
Yes. Yeah. Because if I were to sit down in your office and you were to tell me that I couldn't go to my workouts, I wouldn't come back. I literally wouldn't come back. I'd be like,
No,
no,
but
you're
that's
gonna
what
find a
happens.
way to let me get in the gym.
Yeah.
Listen,
Yeah.
I've seen tons of memes in the jujitsu community where it's like a funny meme of a guy laughing. It's because he went to the doctor, and this guy's like, "Well, you won't feel better until you quit jujitsu." And guys are like, you know, that kind of a funny meme around like, and long distance runners are like that, and like, you know, there's a lot of people that love their sport that are like that. Before we wrap up, man, give us a little bit tip of where you're at, how people can find you,
Yeah.
where you're. I mean, you're in
Yeah.
Greenville. You're in Greenville. That's all I know.
Yeah, off of Woodruff Road. I'm inside of PAP Performance, which is a sports performance facility. I have an office right on the turf, and we have like turf.
Okay.
And we have a weight room, but like my office right there, and then I work on the turf as well. So I'm located
Okay.
inside of there, and anytime that I do, I don't really do anything as far as like mobile as much anymore, but I do
Yeah.
like pop-ups, like I'm going to do an event or I'm going to, you know, someone needs tape real quick for a game, or like if
Yeah.
I feel like we need that tape and we've already been working on stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I'm very flexible in that nature with someone I've already worked with. But yeah, on Woodruff Road is where you can find me. Yeah.
Okay, how about on social? Where do they find you on social? And we'll tag you and all this, and where they find you.
Yeah. So it's simple. Everything is All Prime PT.
All Prime
Website is
PT.
allprimept.com. IG is All Prime PT. Facebook is All Prime PT.
I like it. That's good marketing.
Yes.
It was precisely picked for certain
Yeah.
reasons.
No, I
Yeah.
like it, man. Hey, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your time,
Yeah.
sharing a little bit of who you are and what you do.
I'm excited to get this
obviously-
one out.
Yeah, well, if there's
Yeah.
times we do more, yeah, share more.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome. We were at EXO. I was at IMG. I started my career at IMG.
Okay,
So
nice.
IMG was Mark Verstegen, then went Athletes Performance, and they
Yeah,
turned
yeah.
into EXOS, and hospitals bought and like all that, right? And
Yeah, man.
I think they all wasn't it all one time didn't they all work underneath Andrew's Clinic at one time? Wasn't some of that all
Yep.
under Andrew's Clinic? Yeah.
They're still there. Yeah.
Are they still there with Andrew's Clinic? Yeah.
Golf Breeze? Yep. That's the one in
Yeah.
Golf Breeze.
Yeah. Not a bad place to live and train athletes.
No, not at all.
No, not a bad. No, I can think of worse. There's a reason they
Right.
didn't put Athletes Performance and Exos in Alaska, right? That's what I tell people, right? So, hey, man, I appreciate your time,
right.
and hopefully we get
Thanks
time
so
to chat more.
much. Yeah.
All right. It's good to meet y'all.
With all due respect.